You've probably been told to start your presentations with cold, hard facts to be credible, right? Well, what if I told you that approach is actually, well, wrong sometimes for truly engaging your audience? And that, maybe surprisingly, starting with a story is often the key. Welcome to Daily English Practice. Listen and speak. Today we're taking a real deep dive into English for presentations. Look, for non-native English speakers, giving a presentation, it can feel less like a challenge and more like a high-stakes performance sometimes. So our mission today is to give you a bit of a shortcut to confidence. We'll cover essential phrases, structure tips, engagement techniques, basically help you deliver really impactful presentations in English. We've gathered insights from top English language schools, presentation experts. It's all about practical, immediately useful knowledge.
It's such an important topic, really. So many people, and not just non-native speakers, feel uncomfortable speaking in public. Actually, studies often show something like 75% of people find it daunting.
Wow, 75%. That's huge.
It is. 3 out of 4 people find it intimidating.
Yeah.
And that fear, well, it can definitely be amplified when you're presenting in a language that isn't your first, but overcoming this is such a valuable skill. Professionally, sure, but also for personal growth. So this deep dive, it's really designed to give you clear, actionable tools to navigate that discomfort and hopefully turn it into a strength.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We all know those first few minutes are absolutely crucial. But beyond just saying your name, what are the key things for a strong English introduction? How do we, set the scene effectively right from the start?
Well, first off, a warm welcome is just paramount. Your body language, standing confidently, a genuine smile, making eye contact. It sets a tone of trust almost instantly. It shows you're prepared, happy to be there, open to connecting. And the formality, of course, that depends on your audience. In a formal setting, you might go with, "Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. First of all, let me thank you all for coming here today."
Right, the classic approach.
Exactly. But if it's more informal, maybe just "good to see you all here" works perfectly well. It creates a more relaxed vibe.
That makes total sense, establishing that connection right away.
Yeah.
But I wonder, especially for non-native speakers, is there maybe a risk of trying too hard to be warm and maybe losing formality if the situation needs it? How do you strike that balance?
That's a really good point. The balance really comes from being authentic and just adapting to the context, not trying to sort of overperform. After that initial welcome, it's essential to introduce yourself clearly, especially if people don't know you well. Think of it as building credibility right away. Simple phrases work best, like, "Let me start by saying a few words about my own background. My name is Name. I work in this department specializing in," something like that. And then immediately state your topic and purpose. You could say, "As you can see on the screen, our topic today is," or "The topic of my presentation today is." You can also add why it's relevant. Maybe, "My talk is particularly relevant to those of you who deal with," or "This talk is designed to act as a springboard for discussion on." See how those build naturally.
Yeah, clarity right from the get-go, but always keeping the audience in mind. What about giving them a roadmap? I find knowing the structure really helps me stay focused as a listener.
Absolutely. A clear structure helps the audience follow along much more easily. It actually reduces their cognitive load, so you can indicate the structure with phrases like, "In my presentation, I'll focus on 3 major issues," or "This presentation is structured as follows," and then list the parts.
Makes sense.
And it's really helpful to state the approximate time, too. It will take about X minutes to cover these issues, with time for questions at the end. And finally, just clarify how you want to handle handouts and questions.
Ah, the admin stuff.
Exactly. For handouts, maybe, "Does everybody have a handout?" Or, "I'll be handing out copies of the slides at the end." For questions, you could say, "If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as we go." Or maybe more commonly, "If you don't mind, I'd like to leave questions until the end." Or, "There will be time for a Q&A session at the end." It just sets clear expectations and keeps things flowing.
Okay, so we've nailed the intro.
Yeah.
Welcome, who you are, what you're talking about, the roadmap. Got it. But the real challenge, I think, often starts after that. How do we keep people engaged? How do we make sure they don't get lost as we move through the points? What are the key ways to maintain that flow in English?
Right. That's where this idea of signposting comes in, or as the London School of English calls them, using effective bridges. It's really fundamental. It stops the audience getting lost when you shift from one idea to the next. Think of them like clear markers on the journey of your presentation.
Give us some examples, those bridge phrases. I know it can feel a bit awkward sometimes, moving between ideas smoothly in a second language without sounding, abrupt.
Yeah. Sure. So to start a new point, you could use something like, "My first point concerns," or, "First of all, I'd like to give you an overview of," Simple and clear. When moving to the next bit, next I'll focus on. Or then I'll go on to highlight what I see as the main points of are really effective.
Okay.
To wrap up a section, this brings me to the end of my second point. Easy. If you need to loop back, as I mentioned before, or let's go back to what we were discussing earlier. And for summarizing a point before moving on, I'd like to sum up the main points, or let me briefly summarize what I've said so far regarding great choices there.
Those are super helpful for just keeping that logical flow going.
Yeah.
But beyond guiding them, how do we make sure the really important stuff, the key data or insights, really land?
Yeah.
How do we make those numbers like jump off the screen?
Yeah, you need specific phrases just to highlight or emphasize things. For instance, I'd like to put the situation into some kind of perspective that invites a broader look. Or, more directly, I'd like you to think about the significance of this figure here. That prompts them to really engage with the data.
Right.
If a trend is really obvious, you might say, whichever way you look at it, the underlying trend is clear. These phrases really draw attention. And speaking of attention, it's not just words. How you handle visuals is just as key.
Ah, yes, the dreaded PowerPoint overload.
Exactly. Visuals support your message, they don't replace it. So when you introduce a slide or chart, use things like, you will notice on this chart, or if you look at this slide, we can see, or have a look at these figures and you can clearly see. And a really useful guideline for slides is that rule of 6. Heard of that?
Rule of 6, tell me more.
Max 6 lines per slide, max 6 words per line. It stops that information overload and keeps the focus on you, the speaker.
I love that. Rule of 6, simple, effective, easy to remember.
Correct.
And for talking about data changing over time, what kind of words can make that sound more dynamic than just went up or went down?
Good question. Instead of just sales went up, try more precise language like sales have climbed steadily, or maybe we saw a sharp decline in Q3. Other useful words are things like fluctuate, rise sharply, drop significantly. They just paint a much clearer picture. And if you're tackling tricky issues, framing it helps. I think we first need to identify the problem or the challenge we're addressing today is that sets the stage. And for adding new points, just simple linkers like in addition to this, moreover, or furthermore, keep it all flowing logically.
Okay, so we've got the structure, the signposting, the words for data, but what about connecting on a deeper level? You mentioned stories earlier. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
This is where it really comes alive.
Exactly right. Nonverbal communication, your body language, accounts for, well, a huge chunk, like 55% of how we communicate. That first impression is vital. A confident stance, back straight, real smile, direct eye contact. It builds trust and authority straight away. With eye contact, you don't want to stare, obviously.
Right, that's creepy.
Yeah. The trick is to scan the audience, hold your gaze for a few seconds on different people, align it with your pace, and just scatter glances around the room. Makes everyone feel included.
And facial expressions. How important are they? I've seen speakers with that total poker face, and it just creates a barrier, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely crucial. Your expression should match the feeling of what you're saying. Excitement, maybe empathy, determination, strategic smiles, nods. They build rapport. Just, don't overdo it or it looks fake. And gestures. Open hand gestures often signal honesty. They add dimension. But again, moderation is key. Avoid fidgeting or wild movements. They just distract and can make you look less expert. Keep it natural, reinforcing your words.
What about posture and actually moving around? How can we use the stage or even just where we're standing? I remember my first presentation in English, my notes were physically shaking. Do you have any unusual quick tricks for those pre-presentation nerves beyond just take deep breaths?
Oh, the shaking notes, a classic sign. Yeah, posture first. Shoulders back, feet about shoulder width apart. That looks confident. Movement should be purposeful, not just random pacing. You can move, say, to transition between points. Leaning in slightly for key moments boosts engagement. Moving to center stage can add impact.
Okay.
As for those nerves...
Yeah, beyond deep breathing, which does help, one slightly unusual trick is the power pose. Ever tried that?
Power pose, like Superman.
Exactly. Find a private spot beforehand, stand tall, hands on hips, like Superman or Wonder Woman, for just 2 minutes. Sounds silly, I know, but some research suggests it actually boosts confidence, lowers cortisol. Worth a try.
Huh. Okay, power pose, I'll remember that.
Another quick mental hack. Find one friendly face in the audience. Just one. Direct your first sentence or two to them. It helps ground you before you scan more widely. And things to avoid. Crossed arms looks defensive. No eye contact looks insecure. Constant pacing distracting. Nervous habits like tapping undermines you. And yeah, that poker face kills connection. Fantastic practical tips there for the nonverbals and nerves. But you mentioned stories earlier, right back in the intro. How do stories really grab people in a presentation that might be about, say, complex data or a new product?
Because humans are just hardwired for stories. They make information stick, they resonate emotionally. And the really interesting takeaway here is that you can use classic story structures, even in a business or academic setting, to make your points incredibly compelling. Take the monomyth or the hero's journey. Instead of just what happened, it helps explain how you got the insight.
Ah, so the process.
Exactly. Your team could be the hero, leaving the familiar world of old methods, facing the trials of research or project issues, and returning with the wisdom of a breakthrough. You could frame it like start with the status quo, ordinary world, introduce the problem, call to adventure, detail the struggles, trials, and finish with your solution, return with the elixir. It makes it a journey for the audience, too.
Okay, so sharing the journey to the insight, not just the final fact. What other structures work?
Another really powerful one is the mountain. This maps tension. You build through a series of small challenges towards a climax. Great for showing progress towards a goal. Think. Set the scene. Introduce a small problem, then a bigger one, building suspense, until you reach the peak, the main challenge or breakthrough, then resolve it. You could show escalating product development challenges, building tension, until you reveal the big innovation.
Okay, building suspense. I like that.
Then there's the false start. This is fun. You start a predictable story, maybe how you thought things would go, then bam. You disrupt it with a twist, a failure, an obstacle, and restart the story from that point of learning.
Showing learning from failure.
Exactly. Brilliant for showing resilience. Like J.K. Rowling's Harvard speech, she started talking about university expectations, then pivoted to her period of failure, revealing the lessons. These aren't just for TED Talks. They make business or research presentations memorable because they connect on a human level.
All right. Okay, now, the Q&A. For so many people, this is the most nerve-wracking part, the great unknown. But you hear it's also where you can really shine, build trust. How do we master handling questions in English, especially if it's not our first language?
You're right. It often feels the most challenging because it's unscripted. Step one is anticipation. Try to predict likely questions based on your topic and audience. Prep some brief answers mentally. It reduces the surprise factor.
Okay, preparation helps.
Then, when a question comes, make absolutely sure you understand it, clarify, use phrases like, "I'm sorry, could you repeat your question, please?" Or, "So if I understood you correctly, you'd like to know whether..."
If it's a long question, maybe rephrase it. If I could just rephrase your question to make sure I've got it right, you'd like to know if.
And once you've answered, how do you check if they're actually satisfied? It's not just about firing off an answer, is it?
No, exactly. It's good practice to check. Simple phrases like, does that answer your question? Or, is that clearer now? Or even, is that the kind of information you were looking for?
And when someone asks a really good, insightful question, acknowledge it. Say, "Good point," or "That's a very good question," or "I'm glad you asked that." It encourages more engagement.
Okay, but what if you genuinely don't know the answer? That feels really vulnerable, especially when you're trying to seem like the expert.
It's much better to admit it honestly than to bluff. Authenticity builds more trust than faking it. You could say, "That's a great question. I don't actually know the answer off the top of my head, but I'll find out for you and get back to you."
Right, taking it offline.
Exactly. Or, "Sorry, that's not quite my area of expertise, but my colleague name might know, or I can connect you." Or even, "I'm afraid I'm not in a position to answer that right now, but it's something we can look into." Totally professional.
And handling those tricky ones, irrelevant questions, or maybe even slightly aggressive ones. You need to manage the situation without being rude.
Definitely. For irrelevant questions, you can politely redirect. That's an interesting point, but perhaps not directly related to today's main topic. Or, to be honest, I think that raises a different issue we can discuss another time, okay? If you need to postpone it to keep things on track, just say, "If you don't mind, could we perhaps hold that question until the main Q&A at the end?" Or, "Can we come back to that? I just want to make sure we cover the key points first."
Gentle but firm.
Right. And if someone interrupts, guide it back smoothly. Okay, thanks for that point. Now, I'd like to go back to what we were discussing earlier, or before we move on from that interesting question, let me just summarize. It brings the focus back without being confrontational.
Okay, that makes the Q&A feel much more manageable. So finally, the grand finale. Every great presentation needs a powerful ending. How do we wrap it all up, summarize, maybe make recommendations, and really leave a lasting impression?
Yeah, the conclusion is your last big chance to make your message stick. First, clearly signal your ending. Phrases like, I'm now nearing the end of my talk, or this brings me to the end of my presentation. Do the job.
Okay, signal the end.
Hmm.
Then, summarize your main points. Briefly reiterate the key takeaways. Maybe link back to your opening hook or central idea. As we have seen today, point 1, point 2, and point 3. Or, in conclusion, let's reflect on. You could even finish with a powerful quote if it fits. I just like to finish with the words of.
So tying it all together, reinforcing the core message. What about that call to action? How do we actually nudge the audience to do something afterwards?
Right. Often the goal of a persuasive presentation is a call to action. You want listeners to change something, their behavior, their thinking. The goals usually fall into a few types. Adoption, get them to start doing something new, like use a new tool. Discontinuance, get them to stop doing something, maybe an old process. Deterrence, persuade them not to start something risky. And continuance, encourage them to keep doing something that's working well.
Okay, so different kinds of action. Exactly. For a strong call to action, be direct. Use powerful phrases like, let's make a difference by implementing this specific action starting next week. Or, now let's go out and create opportunities for this outcome. Make it clear, specific, maybe even measurable.
That's super clear for driving actual results, and then just wrapping up the whole experience, saying thank you.
Simple and sincere is best. Thank you all for listening today. Or, thank you very much for your time and attention works perfectly. And finally, maybe the most important thing underneath all these techniques, just remember that being comfortable and confident is key. Practice really is what makes you feel relaxed, engaged, and helps your message truly connect. The more you practice, the more natural all this becomes.
We have covered so much ground today in this deep dive on English for presentations. Seriously, from nailing those introductions and structuring your talk smoothly, to engaging with body language and great storytelling, mastering that sometimes scary Q&A, and finishing with real impact, all packed with practical English phrases. This deep dive really should equip you not just to present, but to truly communicate and connect in English, turning information into something inspiring, making your message stick.
So after all this, after diving deep into the practical sides, maybe consider this. If language is a bridge, right, and your presentation is a journey you're inviting people on, what new story will you choose to tell? The story about your work, your ideas, your challenges, a story that will genuinely inspire your audience to cross that bridge with you, ready to act. Keep practicing, keep exploring these ideas, and keep turning your thoughts into really powerful, memorable messages.